So get this. What if I told you there was a car so smart it knew exactly when it was being watched? And I'm not talking about some sci-fi movie. This is the real story behind Volkswagen's Dieselgate, one of the biggest, most deliberate corporate scandals you've ever heard of. Let's dig into how they pulled this whole thing off.
Yeah, at the very center of this whole mess is a car that was basically living a double life. See, when it was in the lab, it was programmed to be this perfect little angel, passing all the emissions tests with flying colors. But the second it got out on the open road, whoa, it turned into this total polluting rebel. And that split personality, that was the key to a scam that almost brought down an automotive giant.
Okay, so to really get how big of a betrayal this was, you first have to understand the incredible promise Volkswagen was selling to everyone. It was this amazing illusion, and it was all built around one idea: clean diesel. Volkswagen basically painted this picture of the perfect car. They told us you could have it all: the raw power and amazing fuel economy of a diesel engine, but, and this was the kicker, with a totally clear environmental conscience. Clean diesel wasn't just some catchy slogan, it was this powerful promise that, hey, you don't have to compromise anymore.
And right here, this is where the whole story starts to unravel. Because when independent researchers took these cars out on real roads, expecting to see this super clean performance, they found the complete opposite. I mean, these cars were spewing out pollutants at truly alarming rates. The numbers weren't just a little off, they were completely off the charts. It was obvious that something was seriously, seriously wrong.
So, where was the problem? Well, the answer wasn't under the hood, not in the mechanical sense anyway. The real secret was buried deep inside millions of lines of computer code. It was like a digital ghost in the machine, and it had a name: the defeat device.
The defeat device was just so bold in how simple it was. The car's own software was literally programmed with a split personality. In one mode, it's a clean, law-abiding vehicle. In the other, it's a high-performance polluter. And the software's one and only job was to know exactly when to switch between those two masks.
Okay, so check this out. Here's how the scam actually worked. The software was this silent observer, right? It was watching everything: the position of the steering wheel, the air pressure, you name it. If it sensed the super predictable, sterile conditions of an emissions test, bam, it would switch on all its pollution controls. But the second it detected the normal chaos of real-world driving, it flipped those controls right off. This boosted the car's performance, sure, but it also let it pump out nitrogen oxides at up to 40 times the legal limit. 40 times!
Which, of course, brings us to the billion-dollar question. Why? I mean, why would a company built on this global reputation for precision and integrity, for that famous German engineering, resort to such a massive, systematic cheat?
Well, it was pretty much a perfect storm of ambition, opportunity, and just intense pressure. Volkswagen was absolutely desperate to conquer the American market, but these really strict emission standards were standing in their way. Then they figured out that the regulatory tests were super predictable, almost like an open invitation to be cheated. And to top it all off, the internal culture at VW was all about getting results at any cost. That created the perfect breeding ground for a scandal like this to grow.
So when the truth finally exploded back in 2015, the fallout was, well, it was catastrophic. The shockwaves weren't just felt inside Volkswagen's headquarters, they rippled across the entire global car industry.
And this wasn't just some small problem with a couple of models. Volkswagen eventually had to admit that 11 million, that's right, 11 million vehicles worldwide had this illegal software. To give you some perspective, that's more cars than are sold in the entire United States in a typical year. Just massive.
And the financial hit? It was just staggering. We're talking over $30 billion in fines, recalls, and settlements. That number, it's bigger than the entire GDP of a lot of countries. It's still one of the most expensive corporate screw-ups in history.
But honestly, the real cost isn't something you can measure in dollars. The brand itself, once this global symbol of trust and quality, was now basically a synonym for deception. Every single promise they made about being clean, about superior engineering, about being trustworthy, it was all shattered. And it was replaced by this ugly reality of systematic fraud.
But the story doesn't just end with Volkswagen's epic fall from grace. See, the scandal kind of acted as this unintentional catalyst. It set off a chain reaction that would completely reshape the future of how we all get around.
So after the scandal broke, regulators scrambled to close the loopholes that VW had so cleverly used, bringing in much stricter, real-world emissions tests. For all the car makers out there, the message was loud and clear. The diesel dream was officially over.
This scandal basically lit a fire under the entire industry, and it dramatically sped up the big pivot to an electric future.
And that's the final stunning irony in all of this. The scandal that was born from a lie about clean diesel ended up being the very thing that pushed the world toward a cleaner electric future. And it did it way faster than anyone ever thought possible.
You know, this whole thing leaves us with a really big critical question. As our technology gets more and more complex, almost like a black box, how do we regulate something we can't even see? Dieselgate proved that we can't just trust the people writing complex code to police themselves. So the challenge for all of us now is to build systems of oversight that are just as smart, just as clever as the technologies they're supposed to be watching.